My name is Evan Goldsmith, and I will be the moderator for this discussion. Our panelists for today are Jack, Keegan, Maybe Bora, and Muhammad, and our topic is the No Child Left Behind Act. In 2002, the Bush administration brought forth the No Child Left Behind Act, also known as the NCLB. The goal was for Congress to administer all test scores across the nation and create a national standard for all students to meet or exceed. It also monitors kids' abilities to make progress in test scores every year, as well as providing free tutoring for students who can't afford it. The national government gives categorical grants to support the NCLB because they do not want the money used for anything else. The federal government makes sure all states provide the national government test scores from every student in their school system. If they do not comply with the standards, the federal government will threaten to cut some funding for this. The federal government argues that the national standard is required to compare different students across the nation with accuracy and fairly. But the states say that different standards are needed for different states because the education system is different depending on where you get it. Now on to our first panelist for today, Keegan.
Thank you, Evan. State and local governments were failing to get their schools to meet the national standards before the No Child Left Behind Act, also known as the NCLB. National intervention began in 1965 when the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESA, was enacted. This intervention created a governance system to organize things like taxes, helping out with the replacement of school staff, as well as reconstruction of the curriculum. Parent accountability was also considered. Parents are now being made aware when their child's school doesn't meet guidelines. The parents may choose to follow some of those guidelines, which can include transferring the child to a new school and/or receiving free tutoring. This national intervention was very necessary for carrying out this program and helping students and their parents find better education paths.
Thank you, Keegan. Now to Muhammad, who is the other representative for the federal side.
Our second point is that if the national government were to be in charge of the NCLB, teachers would be better educated and better suited to teach all subject classes in grade school. With all subject classes, students will have one teacher for all subjects instead of multiple. This is useful because teachers would be spending a lot of time with the same students, allowing them to know them personally. For a teacher, knowing your student personally can help in many ways, but the most important is being able to identify each student's strengths and weaknesses, and using that information to help benefit the child. Also, better educated teachers would be more spread out within schools that need them. Having these teachers in different schools would be beneficial to the state's standardized testing averages, such as the SAT, ACT, or ITBS, which the national government can use to organize and look over all the schools based on their scores and regulate if need be.
Now to the first representative on the state side, Jack.
Thank you, Evan. National interference in this act would infringe the state government's power according to the 10th Amendment. Nothing about schools and education are in the Constitution, so according to the 10th Amendment, education is reserved for the state government. This means that individual states can make their own decisions about how they teach or set the guidelines.
Thank you, Jack. Now to maybe Bora on the state side.
Thank you, Evan. Since states are required to have 100% of students be considered proficient in grade level reading and math, they simply lowered the bar in order to not be penalized by the federal government. This causes education to be significantly lower in the states that cannot keep up with the original standard. Not only are the standards unreasonably high, but the amount of extra time that states need in order to complete paperwork is too costly. In 2006, the Office of Management and Budget found that states spend 7 million hours on paperwork, which cost them $141 million for that year alone. But states are the only ones that spend a large amount of money because of NCLB. The federal government also spends more money than it should. In 2010, programs under NCLB funded by the government cost $25 billion. This money could have been invested elsewhere, such as in infrastructure, healthcare, or possibly paying back our national debt. Without NCLB, all levels of government would have a significant amount of money and would be able to spend it in more areas that benefit our country more.
Okay, now that all the representatives have given their opinion, let's move on to the question. Jack, ask your question.
I have a question for Keegan. If the power of regulating education is reserved for the states according to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, why is the national government still trying to interfere?
Good question, Jack. The reason the national government should be involved is because if the national government didn't regulate what was going on in the states, things would get done the wrong way. First, teachers with a more advanced degree wouldn't be spread out around the states to accommodate for the lack of them statewide. Second, parents will be less informed about how their child is doing academically. Third, the taxes and federal government money would be used loosely and not be evenly spread out around the states and to the school districts that need them most. And finally, many of the strict guidelines, like allowing students to move schools or to receive free tutoring, would get ignored altogether. All of these things listed would be met and or enacted if the national government was in charge.
I have a question for Jack. Jack, do you believe that states should have complete control over education? If so, why?
1. Education is not listed in the Constitution, therefore it is not a delegated power. 2. States know their own needs better than the government, so it should be left to the states to decide what's necessary for themselves. And 3. It would be very difficult for the government to oversee the education in all 50 states effectively.
I have a question for Mohammed. How will NCLB benefit the entire country?
The No Child Left Behind Act will benefit us by raising the current education level of students so that in their future they can obtain better jobs, which will in turn benefit the economy. Also, the NCLB provides a general standard to what students need to learn in school. If the NCLB were to be completely disregarded, major changes will happen to our education system. For one, states would have a majority of the power in education, meaning that states get to decide their own curriculum and standards. This wouldn't benefit our country because students from one state like Alabama may be proficient in one subject, but students from another state like New York may not even know what that is because that state deemed it not part of their curriculum. This example is a little exaggerated in some aspects, but that's to show what type of power the states could have over education. But with the NCLB, all states would have to be proficient in that subject.
I have a question for maybe Bora. Do you think that the original standard should be lowered, or should there be a stricter punishment if not followed?
I think that shouldn't be raised or lowered. If the standard is lowered, then state and local governments won't try as hard to educate the students. This will severely lower the quality of education in the nation in a few years, which will worsen the economy. However, the standard shouldn't be raised either. If it is raised, state and local governments won't be able to keep up with the standard. In 2006, states already spent 7 million hours on paperwork, which cost them $141 million in that year. With a higher standard, the amount of unnecessary time, energy, and resources spent by states will increase drastically. The only good solution is to get rid of NCLB entirely so that there is no standard in the first place.
It's been the No Child Left Behind Act discussion. I would like to thank all the panelists for voicing their opinions today. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.